to go and explore the uncharted western lands. Their journey began in 1804. They left St. Louis and were headed for the west coast shores. And they were walking, they were walking from the Midwest to the West Coast.
Hey everybody, we're live and direct. We're here at, well, I'm in London, Ontario, Canada. I don't know where everybody else is, but we're here live, and we're going to be talking to the creators of Manifest Destiny. So on the far left, there's the man with the purple hair, Jay Cormier. How are you doing, buddy?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for stopping by and joining us on this adventure.
And in the middle, stuck in the middle with us, is Matthew Roberts. How are you, sir?
Good, man.
Very nice to meet you. Yeah. So welcome to the stream. We have Joe out there, Mads, and Luke watching, and several other people. So as you guys are watching, please do, look us up in the chat and let us know where you are, where you're from, and we'll say hello to you. But we're going to start off the Q&A. And if you have any questions, please do ask them in the chat. We'll filter them and feed them to our guests. We're
hoping for Chris Dingess to join us. So he's just very busy, and hopefully he said he'll do his best to try. So he just might pop up throughout the middle of this.
All right, there we go. Oh, we said he's like.
What is that? Yeah, he just shows
he's
up.
Like, well, I mean, he's like Beetlejuice.
There he goes. Hello.
Hello. That's lovely.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. There's nothing like popping on a screen when someone mentions Beetlejuice.
Right?
If only you had said it 2 other times, it would have been
danger.
Well, we said Chris a couple times because we were saying, well, Chris might be here. He's kind of busy. And then you popped up and it was awesome.
I was having some technical issues on my end.
No worries. Okay. We got people from all over the world, from Turkey and England and Denmark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This is great. Thanks. This is exciting. Thanks for joining us. So this is exciting. So
it's my pleasure.
So we're gonna ask some questions, and we're going to kind of just have a pretty informal chat about this, and we're gonna let the people watching, if they have questions, can enter those questions. But I guess we'll just start with I assume it'll be with Chris, but excuse me. So this whole game Core Discovery is based on the comic that you two put together called Manifest Destiny. I guess where did that originate from? Because the pitch for this is one of the best pitches in history of like Lewis and Clark and monsters. Like that's the pitch, and it's like I'm in. That's awesome. Where did it come from, and how did it come to be?
There we go. Sorry, I just moved us all around.
That's okay. I was hanging out with some people and talking about. This was like well over 10 years ago, talking about how there were a lot of mashups of classical literature, and they were throwing monsters into it. And I think Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter had come out, and I was just sort of like just saying, I was whining about it for some reason. I don't know. I'd had a couple of drinks, and then I was like, you could just like say Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea were hunting monsters. And then I was like, well, wait, why don't I should do that? And
what if?
Yeah, and it started out as an idea maybe for a television series, because that's what I work in predominantly. Mm-hmm. And then it just sort of evolved over time and became a comic book pitch, and then that's how that happened.
Do you want to maybe talk about that a bit, as far as like, because unless my Googling has failed me, is this your first and foray into comics, right?
It's my only foray into comics at all.
How did that come to be? Like, so you said this was kind of meant to be a TV thing, and so how did you all of a sudden go, no, wait, let's make it a comic?
I was kind of thinking it as a TV idea, and then the more I thought about it, the more I became concerned, because I thought this would be a hard sell right off the bat, just because it's monsters and it's it just sounded expensive. It was, and I was a much younger writer at the time, and I didn't have as many credits under my belt, and I just, was kind of like, I'm gonna have to wait till the right time to turn this into that. And then I was put in contact with the people at Skybound, just like to just sort of meet people and talk. And I had this just quick pitch, and they sparked to that, and had Robert Kirkman sort of look at it. They're like, this was, Walking Dead was like already a juggernaut. It was like a baby juggernaut, but it had already, it was already a
It's on his
massive
rise.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like, he is insanely busy. If you can boil it down to like one sentence, like that we can just, like, he can look at really quick. And that was, it's the real journals of Lewis and Clark. They were hunting monsters, and it just sort of grew from there. And then they hooked Matt and I up, and we hit it off, and he was brilliant. And I was like, oh, this guy's going to make me look really good. I can write garbage, and this guy is going to make it look like diamonds.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And so, Matt, from your perspective, how were you brought into this whole thing?
I was fortunate to know Robert before he got famous. I don't know, like, I did some comic books with him before he went to Image. I don't know if you Google Robert's history and the books he's worked on. I don't think he's ashamed of them. Battle Pope and a couple of
I read Battle Pope.
like his indie books. So, like, I met him way back in the days of message boards and stuff like that. At the time, it was a Wizard magazine message board that I met him. I did some fan art for him, and Tony Moore was working on Battle Pope, and he saw the fan art. And he goes, "Tony's going back to college. You want to do a couple pickup issues of Battle Pope?" I'm like, "Yeah," and there you go. And I was in the military at the time, and I decided to stay in. And he always said to contact him when I got out, and I did. So.
It's amazing when nerds connect, eh? When nerds connect online and good things happen. I love it. I love it. So I actually wanted to ask you a question, Chris, just because, of your role in Doom Patrol and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When you were, younger Chris or past Chris, how come you didn't wait for future Chris to do this as a big TV show? We've got a lot of comments in the feed saying, oh, that would have been, Manifest Destiny as a TV show would be so good. I mean, the pricing obviously is a thing, but was it something that you just had to get out? You were like, I have to get this out now.
You mean, why did I choose to do it as a comic book?
Well, yeah, we kind of answered that already, but why didn't you hold off, I guess, is the other part of that.
Well, I really wanted to do it. Yeah, it was an idea, and it was something I knew I could do. And I've always really loved comics. And this was a chance for me to write a comic book. So, that was a no-brainer. And it's way more, this is more prevalent today in television and movies, but if it's existing IP, it is a little easier to put in front of someone and go, this at least is a foundation that you build off of you show a vision for what it is. And I didn't necessarily have that in mind right at the beginning. I just was like, it presented itself as an opportunity to write a comic book. And that seemed like a wagon that I wanted to hop on and see where it would go.
Well, we're glad you did. We're glad you hopped on that wagon.
Yeah.
We have a question from the group, but I'm going to save it for a bit because it jumps into the game, and I want to continue talking about the comic for a bit. And Matthew, I'm always intrigued about the amount of information you get from a writer and how much you get to interpret that and put it in. And how did it work here with regards to? Was Chris very descriptive of like this panel? Were you allowed to kind of?
Yeah. Especially at the beginning, and I don't know if I ever talked to Chris about this because nobody ever told me no, so it was a great book to work on. But Chris, he was writing with a moving camera in mind when he was describing panels sometimes. Like you can see like the whole thing, but you can also see the expressions on their faces and this and that and other thing in the same panel. and just being able to interpret that and do it. And like, you guys know, trying to talk to me, like I hide a lot. So I just go in and do what I think's best for the page. And hope nobody tells me no. And like, nobody ever told me no. So it's a great work.
That is great. Well, when you do amazing stuff, it's no. Why would anybody say no? It was all great.
Yeah, I've been told that I write too much in each panel, right? Like
I mean,
somebody said to me, like, you have 4 things going on. How can I draw that?
The biggest cheat I ever did, and I still remember this because I got away with it. In issue 12, when they were coming into the Native American encampment, there was 2 pages and side by side, and they were supposed to be like mirroring pages of them walking in or marching into camp and realizing that the men weren't there. And then the core discovery comes back in, if I'm remembering it right, when the men are there. And, and one of my worst fairies to read in the script is when Chris goes, and the rest of the crew, when he's describing like a But
oh,
it was
so lazy. I'm so lazy.
Yeah. 2 panels of wide shots of all this stuff. And so I drew the wide shot on the 1 page. And then when he wanted to mirror it on the 2nd page with like them coming back in and marching in front of the men, and like he was describing how the chief was, kind of unimpressed, I boiled that down to the chief's face with the corner of the American flag coming across it. And that's the only thing I drew for that panel. And nobody ever told me no. So instead of having to draw a whole village again, I just drew a face in the corner of a flag and
art.
called it
it's art.
Yeah.
And then, so this is probably more for Chris, but how did the story change as it progressed from what you thought it was going to be when you started and what it ended up being? It definitely felt very Monster of the Week for a few issues, which was wonderful in its variety and creativity of the art that Matthew provided to draw these awesome looking monsters. But then there's definitely feels like a shift at some point. Was that intentional from the beginning? Did it change based on feedback?
A lot of the bigger moves that happened in it, like the character moves, I had in mind from the start, but I didn't know how much time I'd have to tell this story. I didn't know if it would be successful.
Yeah.
And, I was kind of learning as I went writing this book. My editors I started with an editor, Sina Grace, who's now a really amazing, successful comic writer themselves. I think they're a reality show star now or something.
Really?
I think he's on a reality show. At least he's popped up.
I follow him on Instagram for sure. I love seeing him, but
I might be wrong. I could be wrong.
I hope you're right.
But anyway, he was amazing, and he was like a very kind and patient, almost like a kindergarten or preschool teacher with me. And then Robert himself, actually, we sat down for a day, and he was just sort of like, here's how I do it. Like, here's how I, like, the very beginning of like coming up with an outline and stuff like that. Because I was so used to writing for television, and it's different pacing, and it's different to me. And then Sean Makowitz became the editor on the book, and he was an amazing, smart, and patient guy. And but anyway, so I was sort of figuring out the pacing, and even like, writing for like tiny things, like writing for Skybound would be different than writing for a different comic book company just based on where they put the ads. So it was writing for a page flip, and I was very concerned about people getting bored, and Matt's art was so spectacular, and like the action stuff had a really great kinetic energy that I found myself writing for that a little bit more.
Oh, interesting.
And I wanted, I wanted him to go wild on a page flip with like a big, crazy action looking thing or a monster reveal. And that, we had, 6 issues or so to tell a story that ate into a little bit of the character work that I wanted to do. And then, so I did, I think there was mixed reactions with our fans of this. I slowed it down a little bit as we got deeper into it because I wanted to explore the characters more. And then also, there was that initial concept when I came up with it. And I found that it was getting harder to get into different things, like the turn of how we are presenting Lewis and Clark, shifting from heroes to, colonizers, and getting into Sacagawea and York and the other characters. And I started to worry that that it was because I liked the humor in the book, but I was afraid of it becoming just this glib thing of action and jokes and not going in a little bit deeper. So I intentionally slowed it down a little bit and explored different avenues with the characters, because I just wanted, it is such a fantasy and alternate history aside, just that part of our country's history is, to me, pretty heavy. And as times changed and this book over the course of a decade, the intention versus perception, I would say, I started to pay more attention to the impact of that, and that just influenced my writing. I wasn't writing directly for it, but I sort of grew up a little bit. I say that as a middle-aged man, but still grew up a little bit and started approaching the material a little differently.
I think that's
fascinating. That was a long-winded answer. But
I think that's really fascinating, because it does kind of show that, writing, art, all that kind of stuff is reflective of the culture that we live in, and vice versa, that sometimes it can affect the culture that we live in the other way too. So I think that's really, really interesting that, creators mature, and that should be allowed. And sometimes we put out stuff that maybe isn't what we intended it to be in the beginning, or changes in the middle. And I think that's a wonderful process of art. And it's the thing that, more long form writing, or a series of comic books, like you said, that took a decade to put out, allows you to do. And so when we're stuck in this little kind of small world of games, we have to answer those questions in kind of different ways. And so it's really nice to hear. I want to ask a question to Matt. Matt, I think Chris was just talking about characters and character arcs and things like that. Which characters were your favorite to draw in the comic series? And did any of them kind of change in their visual impression over the course of the book?
Yeah, I can barely look at the first 6 issues anymore. I mean, my art wasn't up to snuff for me, and the faces kind of became what they were in a different way than how I started. You know what I mean? Lewis became more square-jawed, and Sacagawea had a big change, because that, like Chris mentioned, like these cultural shifts happened like right as we were starting the book, and for the better. But like, I do a lot of visual research, but I don't do a lot of like historical research, because that'll just distract me for days. So like I did visual research, but I didn't do actual historical research for Sacagawea. And like the inclination at the time was she's just going to be this badass warrior. So like I had her in a midriff, and probably a little more busty than she should have been. And then there's some rightful pushback in the comics community about how women were represented. So I started thinking about that. And then, reading about Sacagawea, like she was only 14. So like she got completely covered up as a character, just because I didn't know what else to do. Like, that's my fault. And then I kind of learned how to make her a badass while presenting her in a way that I thought was respectful. So like, I think she's, and the cape was like a superhero thing, the cape that she wore. So I kind of had my issues with that and found a way to throw it away and then like bring it back. I don't know. She went through a lot of changes, but I just kind of in stride is like, she's allowed to not wear the same thing every day.
Right.
And, she knows how to make clothing, and, so I just kind of took that as a freedom to like find a way to get her right in my mind. respect.
It's actually fascinating historically that there are not many, if any, pictures of her that exist.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
actually don't have a historical reference for her.
I looked for like visual reference when we started. I kind of looked up like Native American clothing and stuff, and then kind of sensationalized that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of pulled back away from sensationalizing that because I didn't want to make it a cartoon. So
Right.
it realized
Smart.
like, especially after issue 12, like anytime Native Americans are on screen, I try to make not to make them this big over costumed thing with feathers and things everywhere. I just kind of try to like they're walking around in day-to-day wear, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever that look like.
Yeah,
And I
that's
may
great.
have under
Yeah, no, this is great. Yeah, this is wonderful. Great, really cool insights. Thanks for this. And I'll repeat to anybody watching that feel free to pop your questions into the chats, into the YouTubes, and we'll ask them away. Now, Chris, we've talked about you and your TV and whatnot already. Given that you've only done Manifest Destiny is the only comic you've done, do you foresee more comics? Do you prefer writing TV to comics? Is there a difference in writing? I mean, they're both coming out fairly, episodic, and then it's done, and you have to live with what is created to then move on to the next thing. So I see some similarities, but what's your preference?
I mean, for better or worse, just because I've done it longer, I'm more comfortable writing television, but that doesn't mean it's better. Comfort isn't always a great thing. I have ideas that would make for interesting comics, but none of them are fully formed enough yet for me to want to take it out. But I would love to dip back into writing comic books if the opportunity ever presented itself.
It's interesting. What is there any challenges that either face that the other style of writing doesn't have?
Well, just now a lot of times when I'm writing television, I do have a budget in mind, and with ink and paper, that goes out the window. So that's fantastic. And pacing is different. Pacing was the biggest difference for me. And similar things are like you want the people to sound like actual people when they talk. At least I do.
Sure.
And I mean, I feel like when you're writing a comic, you're almost doing the performance. I feel like Matt and I were handing off director duties. Like I would write
Right.
how I would see a shot, and he was right that like he totally said it. Like that's how I would see panels, is like setting the camera up and what it would
Right.
see. And like sometimes a lot of times Matt had a better idea, and we'd move the camera and we'd show just the flag coming by, and it looked spectacular. So that's sort of like how I see it. But more than anything for me, it was the pace of what you do in 20 pages of a comic, and the pace of what you can do in 45, 50 pages of a television show.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I'm sure you miss the sweet money that you make in the comic book industry.
I feel like if you are doing comics, you have to be very passionate about it.
Right.
Yeah. Speaking of passion, Matthew, I was wondering what scenes in the series were you, as a sequential storyteller, a sequential artist, really jazzed about drawing, doing the art for?
The ones that I hated reading, probably, because I mean, drawing doesn't come easy for me. Like I don't usually visualize a page. I kind of sculpt it as I go, and like, okay, the energy's flowing this way, and
Interesting.
I'm picking up a theme on the page here. Let me echo that or like reinforce that. I never have like a big vision. So like when I see Chris go and all the crew, and I'm like, or like this big 2-page spread, which sounds exciting and like want to dig your teeth into as an artist, but you're like, I got 2 days left to draw this book. So my initial response to most things is panic. And then I figure it out. And then I realize I can do it. And realize how I'm going to get through the page. And then I get excited as I see the page coming through. So yeah, I mean, like all the stuff in with the I'm losing words here. The vine monsters.
Flora.
There you go. Like all those splash pages that I did there. I'm trying to think. Just coming up with stuff. I mean, some of the quieter pages. Like there's symbolism all through that book that nobody will ever know and I've forgotten about. But it was like intentional echoings and reinforcement of images as I went that that it made sense to me. As I was going. So, yeah. I love that I got it. I love working on the book as hard and as much as I screamed as I got the scripts in. I'm like, when I was done with each individual issue, I was proud of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no.
So what is your process then in terms of art? When you get the script, you read it, you lay out the panels. What do you do?
Yeah, get the script, kind of start thinking how I'm going, and then like I'll just attack a page, and I'll start off standard. Like most of my pages you'll see are like very squared. I don't have a lot of eccentric panel borders and stuff like that. So I'll just lay out a basic square, and I'll do like a Z eye line, and then I'll kind of start drawing. And like I said, I'll see how things emerge as I draw. You know what I mean? Like this person's looking this way in this panel. How's that going to echo down here? Like it gives me ideas as I go. So it's a really unpredictable and ass-backward way to work, I think, for most people.
Does that make it more fun for you to be like, I don't even know what's going to...
I hate it because I don't thumbnail out pages. I work as I go. Like I'll sketch it out on the page, and I'll just kind of erase that. Like when I used to do original art, I work on an iPad now. I've got the messiest pages you'll ever see. I erase so many times, pencils smudged everywhere, and trying to get that stuff tight. But it's just kind of beating the page into submission until it turns into something that I start getting excited about. I never go, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing for this.
Wow.
Yeah,
so, digital has been a godsend for you, I guess. In cleanliness.
Not as much as I was hoping, but yeah, it's cleaner for sure. Yeah.
And the monsters in this book are obviously a big selling point. And then, there's the key monsters that have their own actual arc, but then there was definitely many monsters that are just like they're in a panel and then that's it. How much of that did Chris say, here's what I want? It's got to be a snake with wings, or how much did you go, I know what I'm going to do and do this something weird here?
Yeah, like with monsters, if I had to make up my own monster, like I would be reactive. Like I would draw it and then think like, have I seen something like this before? And I go, yeah, so let's do it this way. Or how haven't I? And sometimes like there's a couple monster designs I'm not happy with, but like that's kind of how they came out with. But there's some I'm like the Vambator. I love that.
Yes.
But like that
I was just gonna ask about it.
That was 90% Chris's description. Like he described the mechanics of it and all that, and just how it came together, and was just kind of play with it. Yeah, but I love the way that turned out for sure.
So who of the two of you came up with I need to wear somebody else's head on my head to be the Vambator? Was that a Chris thing or a Matthew thing?
Chris.
That is pure nightmare fuel. I love it.
I think that's actually like I think it falls into this category because sometimes I would try to sort of figure out what part, at least like a vague region that they were in, and see if there were any sort of crypto zoological things or folklore. And I feel like at least part of it is inspired by some sort of real folklore, and maybe it was called the Vambator in that. I might be wrong.
I will have to go
it's been
look
a
it
long
up.
time. But I think I combined that with a lot of times it was a lot of times the monsters were just based on stuff from nightmares or things I would be afraid of, like, spiders, any of that kind of stuff, and just sort of smash stuff together and be like, that sounds scary. And then Matt would draw it and I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty scary looking.
But there's even some more creative ones, like the grass being monsters or the rock face being a monster. Like those were really creative ideas of just such a pleasure to read about and be surprised by. It was great.
The grass stuff was a nightmare, and I forget why the rock thing. I think the rock thing, I was just panicking about like what they're doing. I wanted them to put them on a mountain, and we'd done so much flying stuff like the Van Meter and stuff like that. It was just I forget exactly where the inspiration came for that particular one.
In 1903, the townsfolk of Van Meter say they saw a winged giant monster.
Oh, wow.
And more than a century
There you
later, the mystery remains unsolved. So
There
that's
you
where
go.
it's from.
Yep.
The
That's
Van
awesome.
Meter Visitor is what it's called.
Yeah.
It is horrifying. We have some more questions here. Chris, what was the most interesting thing that you learned while writing the series?
Just like historically,
Anything.
the mystery surrounding Lewis's death I found to be very intriguing. Reading bits about, which I didn't really get a chance to go into too much, which I knew I wouldn't because it was the end of the book. What sort of happened to everyone at the end of this journey, the characters that weren't fictional. I found that to be interesting. And I mean, the most interesting thing to me was sort of learning how to write a comic book. But as far as the actual material goes, it was for me learning about the real stuff that happened after the journey.
Right,
I
the
mean,
aftermath of it all.
Yeah, another part of the inspiration for this book was I remember having to read portions of the journals of Lewis and Clark in school, and I feel so disrespectful, but it was probably because of the age I was at. I was bored to death by it because it was just like a lot of like stuff provisions that they packed and descriptions of things where it's like,
80 pounds of small beads.
Yeah, like when it comes to describing landscapes, Lewis was very good, but he's no Hemingway. So
It's more of a naturalist, right? It's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, one of our viewers is saying, Glee Larson says that they learned a lot too about Lewis and Clark in their school days because they grew up along the Columbia River in Washington State, like where they ended up, right? So
There you go.
lots of people, Lewis and Clark has been, I guess, foundational in the American education system.
Yeah. The only thing I have from Lewis and Clark that I remember was basically like an elevator pitch of Lewis and Clark. Like I knew just the basics. Like they're part of my school memory, but as far as what was taught to me, like they went, it was like a block of things that happened in America around that time and opening up America. Like they were kind of like an asterisk or something. I didn't know a whole lot about them.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing too, is that and I mean this wasn't a surprising thing to me, but it was just kind of like, oh yeah, it was. As I was looking into this, you realize, when you're being taught history, especially in the lower grades, how they blow by just certain things and they give you the elevator pitch, so you go, well, that was neat.
Yeah.
And they don't go into any detail, about repercussions or maybe hidden agendas or anything like that.
Okay, so we're going to move on to one of the viewer questions. And so now, Chris, you obviously have worked a lot with just IP work in general. So now when you first heard that this was being turned into a board game, was there any particular requests for the game that's by Joseph McNamara or things to steer clear of that we wanted?
Do you remember any, Matt?
No, like we did an initial play test with Jay, and I was kind of like, because it wasn't a play test, you were describing the game to us. So I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me at all. But I'm not very familiar with board games. I'm like, how is this going to? And then we did the play test, and I'm like, oh, this is badass. And I was really kind of taken in by that first play test we did last summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like the only things that we kind of were sensitive about was like just the tone of how things are represented. You know what I mean? Like, because it's an adventure story, but also it's dark as well. And like, how do you do that in a board game? I don't know. I don't remember anything specific, and I feel like I'm rambling now because I don't have a point.
That's okay.
I remember there was. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna say, I think that's an excellent point. That was really the main concern. I feel like that was a concern for everyone involved.
I remember there was some discussion early on about how the board game's going to tackle the ending, and we, based on our mechanics that we have in our game, the exploration, which our game mechanics are just basically all about exploration. But by the last arc of the whole story, there's not a lot of exploration, so the game doesn't really,
delve into that too much.
Delve into that whole aspect of it. But there was a kind of a, how are we going to do that? And we were like, well, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because it does leave something for fans to go check out in the comics, right? Because the comics, spoiler alert, not really, but aren't always about exploration. So the games that you're going to play that Jay and I made are basically exploration. And as you go through the chapters, you just explore more and more. And then some funky stuff happens, and even more funky stuff happens. But the comic isn't over when the game ends. There's several more trade paperbacks after that you should all go read because they are fascinating. And the art is great. The story is good. And it's going to pull it all together. And you'll understand why some of the reaction to the name, the initial name, has weight to it, right? So speaking of that, Manifest Destiny, I mean, we'll have to say it sometime today. When you picked that name, did you know that it would be kind of like a incendiary a little bit? Chris, what do you think?
We knew. I think the name was a bit more of a group effort. Like the original sort of working title was The Secret Journals of Lewis and Clark, which to me, and I think to other people, sounded like kind of not childish, but like a little kitsch for what we wanted the book to be. And we knew the material was going to get darker and darker as it went along. And Manifest Destiny just sounded, I mean, look, from a pure business standpoint, it's much more, it caught eyes more than the Secret Journals of Lewis and Clark. And then also just sort of for us, it made sense in like, it's such a term that we've all seen for years and years and years now. It kind of just like, at least the words, you go, okay, I know what that means. That's messed up. But there was something like really having to do with this book that if you really like put it in perspective of this book, it has kind of like a demonic sort of vibe to it, like manifesting and stuff like that. And it just fit with the overall theme that would grow in this book. And it just made sense. And it made, again, it goes back to how reactions to just small things, not small things, but things that you think are small in a moment, how reactions to the impact of words change over time.
Yeah, we have some feedback from our international audience. Luke Mirthwaite, who is from England, said he didn't know who Lewis and Clark were until his late teens, and then he saw the movie Event Horizon. They're mentioning that. And then Derya, who is from Turkey, said for a second he thought that it was Lois and Clark, Lois Lane and Clark Kent.
That's funny.
So, different story. Also DC. We probably won't ever work with them for these games. they're too big for our britches, I guess. And it is fascinating. I don't know if you've read the letter that I wrote about the change in title to Core of Discovery, and why in a game it's very different than a game, like I said before, a long form of media where you have time and space and breadth and depth to develop the concept of how you turn Manifest Destiny on its ear and how you make the characters that you think are heroes into not so nice people by the end of it all. And within a game, we don't have that luxury. And we also don't have the luxury of people having read 48 issues of a comic book, right? And so when they saw the word Manifest Destiny, they were like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so, the whole change in title was a big thing. How do you guys feel about that? How do you feel about the change in the title?
I mean, I think it's necessary because, like you said, when you read that title, and like especially when I read it as being asked to come on the book, it's like, this is kind of weird. It's kind of stinky, but like at the time, I was ignorant to a lot of things, especially as like the world made you more aware of how important these things are and what our history was and how it affects people. I think the onus was on Chris, and I guess me to some extent to sell what we meant by that title, and not to turn it from like adventure story with like Sunny Horizons, Manifest Destiny, into something very oppressive and dark. And yeah, you just don't have. How do you do that with a board game where you're just kind of doing a playthrough? You don't have the opportunity to land that punch, I don't think. At least we haven't figured.
Yeah, it's more abstracted, right? It's more mechanical and procedural in that sense. Yeah, that's definitely it's been challenging for us to try to figure out that because I don't know how much people want to play as bad people, So, but we don't want to be whitewashing of the whole history, so we want to try to figure out how to represent that.
We were talking before we went live, and I mentioned, are we allowed to do spoilers for the comic book here? Like,
I mean,
you said spoilers, so now
I think it's been like a
spoiler
year.
alert.
Yeah,
but like I think when the moment where the book sold its nature in a brilliant way was the Fezron, and I didn't know how that was going to turn out. So because one of the themes that was kind of like is Americana, right? And so Bullfrog and some of the monsters were kind of from what I understood from what Chris said, like just based on Americana and kind of playing with that. And so I started playing with I decided when the Fezron came to play with like Disney and stuff like that, and I really cartooned them up. And I was having fun with that, and then but I didn't know how the shoe was going to drop. And it
it made it better though.
Yeah,
they were
friendly and cuddly and nice.
It was like, oh my god! But then like I think that's when we sold the title. At least we started to sell the title because that was like, yeah, these guys are dicks.
Yeah.
Yes, that was like a pivotal moment for me as a reader, for sure, 100%. And Collins soon became like my favorite character because he's like that guy actually has the head on his shoulder, right? Obviously York does as well, but and a couple other characters too. But it was like the two people in the lead aren't the nice guys, and that made a lot of sense. Jordan Corbally says, well, to age myself, we read about Lewis and Clark in elementary school in Southern California back in the 50s. And they were culture heroes and great adventurers shown as glamorous in some of the early Hollywood movies. And then by college, which would be for John in the middle of the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, second women's movement rights, et cetera, the thoughts about history changed, and more so in the 21st century. So John is just giving us like this time capsule view of how were Lewis and Clark seen from the 50s and the 70s, and now we're 2024 guys, and how do we view it? And the term Manifest Destiny has come up again and again in terms of, that's not a great term, so that's why the title switched. So that's the story, everybody. If you want to know why the title switched, it's because it's not a great term. And in a book, we have time to explore that, right? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, I also feel like Cores of Discovery reflects what the game is more about. It's more about exploration and discovery. You're literally flipping things over and discovering. So
yes, it really felt good.
I feel like it captures the spirit of the game 100% more.
Right.
Sorry, I had to cut you off.
No, it's good. There's one person of the team that's missing from this call that maybe we'll just chat quickly about. Was your colorist was Owen Jenny. So you obviously did amazing illustrations, but Owen just really brought them to life colorfully. And talk about your relationship with Owen and what happened. Like, was that did he get notes, or was everything he did, like, how did it work as far as the working relationship? Or did you just pass it off and then you were done with it and it was somebody else that approved it?
Yeah, a very, like I said, solitary artist. I wasn't a very good team member as far as communicating with people. And I still feel bad about that, but I loved everybody on the book. So, but me and Owen don't have a huge out of comic relationship, but I loved everything he turned in. And, you know, I made sure to like touch in with him now and again. Like, I love everything you're doing. But when he first came on the book, like I draw with a full image in mind. Like I have colors in mind, and kind of however I visualize it, it's in my head in a certain way, which it would be hard for me to describe, but I know when it's wrong. So one of the initial posters we did, like a promotional poster for the book, and it was very artsy on my part. Like I had this tree roots turn into blood, turn into the red and white stripes of the American flag, and like, you know, blah blah blah. And Owen's first color pass was like, I didn't describe that to Owen, so that's my fault. Was one, beautiful, but it was the stripes that were supposed to be this big symbolic artistic thing were blue, and I'm like, he doesn't get it. And like I gave him these notes to make sure they were red, and he turned them red, and it was worse for it. The initial pass he made on it, just visually, was way more beautiful than how I was trying to get him to do it. And since that promotional image, I just left him alone, and he's never disappointed.
Oh, and that's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's wonderful. And then I'll share with the listeners a really fun story that you two know, was that I was trying to ask Matthew for some more art, but you were just bogged down with some other book that you're working on. And so I remember I asked you, I'm like, hey, can we get some of the other artists to do just this non-character work, like some just background art that we need to be done? And you said, sure. And so I went on a Discord channel that's for comic creators. And I said, hey, can somebody, you know, kind of like mock Matthew Roberts' style and make some background stuff and a couple of gear items that we had? And who pops up but Owen Jenny pops up. He's like, I can do that. I'm an illustrator and I'm the colorist for the whole comic run. I'm like, oh my gosh. So now,
and what's even funnier is that he lives in the same city as you.
Yeah, I didn't even like. So
we didn't know he's Canadian. I forgot.
We do this whole thing, and he finally gives me the invoice for paying him, and I'm like, wait, Vancouver? We should go have a coffee, play this game together. He's like, yeah, let's do that. So that's just really great. So he made the forest scene. Actually, Sam, you could probably just throw it up there. He made the forest scene for the background of the board. It used to be just kind of green. If you watch any playthrough video, it's just a blah green. And so we had Owen do this forest scene, and these pat tokens look a little bit more lively. So that looks good. And he did I can't remember which ones. I think he did the water skin and the sextant. He did those. So yeah, otherwise everything else here is Matthew.
No, he's such a part of the look of that book.
Yeah,
and it's again because like I draw with a certain lighting in mind, but I don't want to communicate that to Owen because it went terribly the first time I ever did it. So I just left him to his own devices, and like I said, he knocked out of the park the whole series. But like especially, I had to revisit some of the art for this game, and we were doing the hardcover version, and just looking at it without my perception of what I wanted with that page, because it's gone after it's been printed. Like just looking at the book visually, Owen killed everything. Yeah,
got it.
He's a huge part of that book.
Yeah. Matthew, what do you hope that people take away from the book in terms of the artistic portion that you did?
That it's legible. I mean, a lot of the story work is Chris. Like I made a couple artistic decisions just to make it either easier for me because I was on a deadline, or easier to read from a comics perspective. You know what I mean? Like, you know, emphasizing this and another panel instead of the panel where it was originally described. But like, it's the whole narrative impetus and description, and it was Chris. And I just hope I showed him off well. I mean, I had a blast doing it, but like it's just my job to do honor to the story, and I love the story.
And then Chris, what about you? What do you hope readers take away from the comic?
God, I have no idea. You know, I do hope they're entertained, but I hope they're challenged a little bit. I mean, that's kind of what you want to do as a writer. So yeah, that's pretty simple for me.
Okay.
And so now that so you're so infused with the TV series and whatnot, everyone's probably wondering, and I'm sure you've been asked numerous times, but now we have to ask about Manifest Destiny TV show. What's the deal? When's it happening? How do we make it happen?
It's here. Send your cards and letters, folks. It may happen someday. It's a very up in the air kind of thing. It's
But aren't you one of the big wigs now? Can't you just make it happen?
I am not a big wig. I'm a small toupee in the industry. No, it's one of those things, like in the big conversation, it's a topic that comes up amongst things every once in a while, and maybe it will happen someday. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But if not, I'm very satisfied with the story that our team told as a comic book.
Yeah, for sure.
So I do have to ask you though, if you were to fan cast any one single actor in one single role for Manifest Destiny, the movie or TV show, who would it be and what role would they play?
That's either of you.
Either of you. Both of you even.
I think I told Chris once, and this is, we were doing the book and the show Vikings had come out.
I was actually just thinking about that as we were talking about TV show. Anyways,
And that-
keep going.
No, I don't know the actor's name, and I apologize, but he was the priest, I believe. And I'm like, that dude looks like what Lewis looks like in my head. So if we ever get this thing made, I want him. And that's the only thing I've ever really considered. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's neat.
Let's get him on the phone.
Yeah, right. I don't even, like I said, I don't know his name. It just struck me. I think it was his nose or something. Like, that's how I'm trying to draw Lewis. Like, it just. But usually, they become characters in their own right in my head, and I don't really try to paste them on anybody else. I haven't really considered it outside of that.
Fair.
There was a list that I wrote at some point that I don't have
Ooh.
in front of me, but I do, like, just from like an anecdotal standpoint. I remember years ago watching Game of Thrones and seeing Nikolaj Water-Kolster. I just slaughtered his name, by the way. The guy who played Jaime Lannister, I thought would have been an interesting Clark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Since Matt gave his Lewis, I'll give a Clark. And
Nice. Perfect.
yeah, because I think those would be two very hard roles to play, especially as a show. If in luck it went many seasons, and they would have to have comic timing, but then also become despicable if need be.
Awesome.
Not Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we started the book, just trying to get ideas in my head and kind of like the tone I was going for as a new book that I didn't know much about. Just how character interplay and the way Chris is writing it. Russell Crowe and I forget his name. Anyway, Master and Commander.
Paul Bettany.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Kind of who I had in mind, because I love that movie.
That
but then you
was
realize
an inspiration
they,
too.
not a very good analogy as the book goes. You know, it's easy when you start, like, Lewis is the sciencey guy and Clark's the get her done guy, and like
It's like a buddy cop movie.
Yeah, they diverge from those characters. I don't know how quickly, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
I
good.
think it's good.
As we wrap up this wonderful hour we've had with you, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I'd love to ask each of you what's on the docket, what's next, what can we look forward to in comic or not in comic form from either of you? Chris, why don't you start?
I am working right now with the team for season 2 of Gen V. I wasn't on season 1, but
I love season
for
1.
Amazon spin-off of The Boys. It's a really fun group
really
of
is.
writers, and
Yep.
I'm only a month in, but they're really brilliant, smart people, and I look forward to getting deeper into the season with them.
It's great. Oh, that's exciting. Good to know. That's really good to know. I'm really excited about it because I love season 1 a lot. I might even say I like
fun
Gen V
show.
more than The Boys. Like it was really tight and a nice. It was great. Yeah.
Will
I
you
love
be coming up
Homelander. I
to?
love to hate Homelander, but besides that,
But will you be coming up to our end of the world then? Because it's shot near me.
I don't know. I think on this one I'm gonna be in the writer's room for most of the deal.
Well, if you
exciting.
do, give us a shout.
Yeah.
And Matthew.
Skybound's rolling out the Universal Monsters, and that's what I'm working on. Issue 1 of Creature from the Black Lagoon released last week, and I'm finishing up the last issue of that series as we speak. So,
Cool.
first issue series, it's really fun to do. And again, like I've had a team that has kind of let me do what I want to do, even though it's an IP book. So I'm having fun doing it and playing around, and I'm excited about it. So
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Oh, last quick question from the
Go for it.
audience. I just noticed this. John Cobley's asking, if there was a Manifest Destiny TV show, would it be live action or animated?
Oh, I see. Interesting. It'd be cool to see an anime. See all those monsters and stuff.
Yeah, that is a great question. In my head it's always been live action.
Yeah.
It's always execution. Like for me, like I don't. Yeah. I mean, if it's done well, I'll be excited about it. I mean, I'll be excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, I prefer I in my own mind, especially when it's a comic, I enjoy seeing it taken from the page and presented in the the real world, where a lot of times I like the illustration of animated work. I feel like I've already gotten it from the book.
Nah, I'm with
So
you there.
You like to see things taken off the page.
Whoa! Now
Into
there is
another
segue.
medium.
Yeah,
Yes.
good segue. Good segue.
That is our time for everybody. I really appreciate everybody coming on. This has been super wonderful. Obviously, we've met before, but great just chat with you about comics and your processes and stuff like that and learning about all that. Super wonderful. And for everybody else watching, thanks for watching. And our game Core of Discovery, based on the comic Manifest Destiny from Chris Dingess and Matthew Roberts and Skybound, the game is now available on Kickstarter right now. So go check that out. And we'll see you all later.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.